Hello, everybody, and welcome to Keep It Spiritually Simple. I'm your host, Sandra McEllis. And boy, do we have another great show for you with Dr. Nancy Clark. We're going to be talking about plant medicine and all kinds of things that have been spirit delivered to her through her in her book called Master Plant Teacher. She's got some amazing books. If you want to familiarize yourself with Dr. Nancy, go back and look at some of our other episodes. We talk about an intro to plant medicine. We also talk about some of her spiritual poems and sort of dissecting them and learning a little bit more about their deeper meaning. So there's a lot of core value in those videos, along with the one we're on today. So you don't miss any upcoming episodes. Please take a moment to hit subscribe, share, leave a comment, and of course, like the video so that it can circulate into other people's social media platforms. And perhaps it'll show up at the perfect time, as all things do. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Nancy. Hey there, girl. How are you?
Doing fantastic. Thank you again for having me back on your podcast.
Oh my goodness, you're welcome. Well, let's just get right into it because we got some hot topics to talk about that are going to be fun that people don't really understand a lot about. So you're what I would call somebody who has deep wisdom and understanding and direct communication, etc., with the plants. And as a teacher of that, I can't wait for people to hear your side of things and your perspective through your experiences.
Yes, it's actually this book is very well researched. All the information in this book came from the research that I did. This book is my dissertation put into book form. So it's about basically it took a little over a year to write this book because it took that long to write my dissertation. And then I put it into a manuscript, and Spirit said, we want you to publish this one and public to have access to this. So I did. But yes, I think today's show we'll do an overview. I'm going to go into a lot of topics and we can discuss them. And I think it's going to bring up probably a lot of questions for your viewers. So hopefully they can feel comfortable enough to write in the comment section what they feel comfortable sharing. Maybe they have gone through sacred plant medicine ceremonies themselves, or they're interested in doing in the future possibly some plant medicine. So this is a good introduction to them, to these master plant teachers that are on the planet. And they've been on the planet long before we showed up. So they have a lot of wisdom. And I know for some reason we're told they're not sentient beings, but they are very sentient beings. And they hold a lot of wisdom that we actually we get to enjoy through the plant botanicals and herbs and things of that nature. So any rate, to start with, I wanted to share that we're spiritual beings having the human journey, and we come for several reasons, and some of them is to know our true identity and to have an awareness of who we are, our lessons, and our purpose work, just to name a few. And we're also to enjoy in physicality and experiences along the way. And we're also to be aware of our identity. So, how do we show up in the world? Well, we need to step into our true energetic signature. And we need to go outside each day and be ourselves, just be ourselves. And so, let us be our truest expression to the world and to drop into our true energetic signature. Now, each person does have an energetic signature. It's like your spiritual fingerprint, so you don't get lost out in the big cosmos, your individuality. So, Spirit does know you're here in the Earth School. And so, our true beingness is our true self, and it's a way of being, and we have to be it and not say it. And it takes strength, heart, and boldness, just this energetic way of showing up in the world. And so we hold ourselves, our uniqueness, and we came here not only to step into our purpose work, but also to remember our true identity before we stepped into to human form. And entheogens, and I just want to say some people will call them entheogens. Other people say entheogens. Both is okay. Both are fine. They're both good. So, why are so many people around the world turning to entheogens, also known as psychedelics? Well, entheogens offer the ability for people to have mystical experiences while they are in sacred ceremony, their true identity, their energetic form, their purpose work, their lessons here on earth, guidance with current situations in their life, connection with loved ones on the other side of the veil, spiritual awakening, and so much more. So the entheogens are non-addictive, psychoactive substances, and shamans are highly trained for many years to utilize these plants in sacred ceremonies. Shamans are a society of people that use plants as a means of successfully have mystical experiences leading to enlightenment, cosmic consciousness, self-realization, God realization, which is also known as divine union in the West, which all leads to oneness. So psychedelic actually comes from the Greek word psyche, meaning soul, which peels back the psyche to reveal the soul and a deeper meaning and revelations. If a person doesn't show respect for the plant medicine, this intelligence, this consciousness, they won't have the experience. It won't happen. The person must adhere to the required diet before the ceremony. The intention, purity, and surrender is very special. The gut is full of neurons, so what a participant eats will affect their ceremony. The fix is not in the plant medicine brew cup. It's the integration after the ceremony. The integration process is taking what is revealed to the initiate during the ceremony and bringing in guidance to the person's life, which actively changes in a positive way how a person lives their daily life. Entheogens allow for one to step outside the normal mental activities of the conscious mind and to go into other areas in the cranium, such as the pineal gland. Entheogens offer healing, spiritual awakening. Entheogens offer the ego death, which we'll go into that a little bit here in a second, and also provides a different experience for each person. So we're not to compare our experiences with anyone else because they are meant individually for each soul. And the entheogen can also show areas that are deeply hidden, such as deep grooves in the conscious mind, patterns, habits, personality issues to the person while in ceremony and under the influence of the different entheogen substances. Inner experiences are valid and confirmed. The inner knowing that takes place helps the person to make the necessary adjustments. Just taking the entheogen is the first step. One needs to go into integration and do the inner work needed for a permanent transformation. These inner experiences are never forgotten, and integration helps sorts out the messages that came to the person to help them with guidance, self-awareness, purpose work, healing, and a deeper connection with the divine. And the purpose of this book is to show that entheogens facilitate mystical experiences. So these master plant teachers in the form of sacred ceremonial plant medicines and other form of natural and non-natural psychedelics allow for people to cross over the veil into higher dimensions and have direct mystical experiences, offering insights and bringing people to a higher knowingness of their true identity and oneness with God. These mystical experiences expands people's consciousness to evolve after experiencing enlightenment, cosmic consciousness, self-realization, samadhi, God realization, and many other dynamic impressions while the inward psychedelic journey is taking place. These mystical travels are outside of time and space, causing a deeper impact. Therefore, the psychonauts are forever changed and introduced to a higher version of themselves. So I know I put a lot out there, so we have plenty to talk about on these different topics so that's kind of a brief overview of the master plant teachers, and we're going to go deeper into more of them over the centuries and all the different kinds, and how different civilizations over millennia has used these uh, sacred plants. And in some cultures, they were actually declared a deity because they showed your divinity within. They got to strip away everything, your physical, your mental, your personality, your shadow, and only see your true divine essence, your true energetic form without all these coverings. And then people had this amazing experience of seeing their own divinity and that they are this divine being. And so, of course, when you cross over the veil and you have all these mystical, inner mystical experiences, you're never going to be the same. And so people talk about, oh, I went to these other dimensions as if they exited out of their body. No, it's within your own cosmology. So you're not going off to some far flung, all these, the kingdom of heaven is within, everything is within, the galaxies is all within you. And a lot of times they'll say, well, where is this? Well, it's actually in your cranium. The third eye is the opening, but it's all actually from the third eye up to the cranium. These are all where the upper dimensions reside. So when you're in these upper dimensions, you're still well within it's within your own cranium that all these exist. So you're not doing all this flying around outside your body at all. You don't need to.
Sorry, I had muted myself. I'm really glad that you pointed that out because a lot of people assume, because they hear so many stories about people doing psychedelic trips. They're like, oh, I went to this other land or this other place, or I was gone for hours, and someone was watching over my physical body. And it's like, okay, could somebody explain that? Because to a lot of people, that's very scary. But what you're saying is, and I always knew that the pineal gland was just like the light bulb and that
Mhm.
there was so much more attached to it.
Oh,
At least
yeah.
that's what my spirit guides have shown me, that there's multiple different connections, but everybody wants to focus on the pineal gland and decalcifying it. It's like, get past that. Once you get through that gate, there's a lot of places you can go. I've
Mhm.
never experienced a psychedelic trip. I just have had my own experiences mystically. But I would love to actually do this. But a lot of indigenous countries and tribes have done this for years. It would be a sacred ceremony. It would be a rite of passage. It would be, you'd go before the shaman or you'd go before, the indigenous tribesmen that do this. I find it absolutely fascinating. And I'm glad that you just pointed out that you don't just pick up and go somewhere. You're safe and sound. You're just in a portion of your mind that is taking you to places that you don't get to go to because you're in a lower atmosphere physically and mentally. So you're not reaching those higher dimensions.
Yes, what's in between is the ego. The ego is the barrier between this is the physical reality is the land of the ego. It's the world of the ego. So when you turn the ego off, that's why they call it the ego death. What you're doing is you're temporarily sliding the ego aside, you're turning it off temporarily so that the soul can leave the physical reality and travel into these upper dimensions or other dimensions. And so that's really what's taking place. And then when the medicine wears off, the ego is turned back on. And actually, they've defined that in the brain as the default mode network. So that is turned off, and therefore people travel. And actually, we do it at night. The spirit soul doesn't need to sleep. It's the body that needs to rest.
Mm-hmm.
So when we talk about this DMT, and actually, that's what allows for the default mode network, the ego, to be turned off. But actually, our brain produces DMT every night before we go to sleep. So that way we travel at night. So the body's resting, the soul travels at night, and then it comes back in the morning. But so DMT is actually so important that our brain produces it. It's actually needed. And so people talk about this DMT as if it's something that shouldn't be in the body, or it's foreign to the body, and our receptors in the brain produces it and recognizes it with the plants. So we have this sacred connection with the plants, or we have receptors in the brain that accept these different DMT psychoactive substances that's within the plants. And so that I wanted people to know this isn't, it's non-toxic, it's non-addictive. It's very interesting why it's classified as a Scheduled 1, which is classified as illegal and the most dangerous of drugs. And we'll get into that, the political reasons behind that as we go along in this series. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, I wanted to point out to everybody, this is just the part one, because we're really going to take some deep dives into plant medicine on these series. So again, another reason to subscribe so that you don't miss upcoming episodes. So let's talk about that for a second, because I know, like in my past life regression work, when I get someone into their breathing realm and their place of just sort of letting go and trusting their space and their place, that, I teach them that there are these gatekeepers to their subconscious. I said
Yeah.
they're called bouncers. And so once you get in there, just tell them to go ahead and take a nice long ass break and let you get in there and start cleaning the attic. Let you go through a lot of the memories that you've got stored in there and a lot of the golden nuggets that are stored in there. So it makes total sense that the ego has to kind of step aside in order for you to get to these other realms. And then when you come back down to this atmosphere, the ego then has its place here.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's neat. It's funny you bring up wisdom keepers. There are dimensions that your frequency has to be high enough that they will allow you access into them. You can't just be barging into any of these dimensions when you don't have clearance. It's kind
Right.
of like you have to have clearance to get in there because they are protecting the arcane wisdoms, and they do not want the wisdoms to get into the wrong hands, to be used for nefarious or negative reasons, that these wisdoms are brought back across the veil back into this physical reality. So there are wisdom keepers, there are gatekeepers. So people will say, well, how come certain people are able to get into some of these other dimensions and others aren't? And it's a lot about resonance. It's a lot about your frequency level. And that's why it's so important to keep your frequency as high as possible and continue to work on getting your frequency very, very rarefied and fine. And so yeah, it's very interesting you brought that up, because a lot of people don't talk about that. They just think they can just fly into these different dimensions and all is welcome. It's like, no,
Mm-hmm.
no, that's not true. So,
Yeah, and the more you get into this, the more you have such a reverence and respect for these different layers and levels that you come and go from. And
mhm.
yeah, I want to be able to touch base on all of those as well when you get into the series. So, I also found it interesting in your book, psychedelic comes from the Greek word psyche, meaning soul, which peels back the psyche to reveal the soul and deeper meaning and revelation. So a lot of people just think psychedelics and they think, oh, drugs, bad, because that's what our programming here on this, society has led us to. So I want to release those misnomers
Yeah,
and
I'm glad you brought that
misinformation.
up.
So we do need to talk about that, whether you're ready to now or
No,
down the road in the
yeah.
series, but we do need to talk about
Well,
why.
yeah, that's why they changed the name and brought up entheogens, because entheogens basically denotes that as a use as a medicine. It's plant-based, non-toxic, non-addictive. It's not used for recreational use at all. It's used for healing, for awareness, awakening, for so many variety of different things, healing in many different levels, whether it's emotional, physical, and mental. So, yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I think that we still have this remembrance of, the psychedelics from the 60s and all the recreational use. And that's not what this is about at all. This is sacred plant medicine. It is sacred. If you don't have a reverence and a respect for the master plant teacher that has called you to the brew or to the ceremony or to this initiation, you will not be having the deeper mystical experiences that I think that a lot of people are looking for. They may reveal certain things in your life that need to be fixed, but if you're wanting to go deeper beyond just how to clean up your life, this isn't about just self-fixing, it's about self-discovery. And as you go deeper into these dimensions, you see the vastness of yourself as this divine being. And so there is this reverence because the master plan teachers are just facilitators. They facilitate the mystical experiences. They're not the ones that create the mystical experiences. The mystical experiences are within you. They are part of you. It's your higher self speaking to you. And they facilitate the connection to get you beyond the ego, as also known as the ego death. And therefore, you're able to meet a higher level of yourself. And so they're very needed there, but they are to be respected. And so a lot of people think they just show up and they don't do what's asked of them, which is the dieta, a special diet before you come into ceremony, set your intentions. Your temple needs to be pure and clean. Set and setting is very important. The space needs to be spiritually protected. You are opening yourself up to go into these dimensions. Not all these dimensions are safe. So you'll hear people say, "Oh, I had a bad trip." Well, what there's a lot of things that go into that, and some of it could be the shaman wasn't completely trained, a highly skilled shaman. This is something they've done since very young age, and they are skilled is doing more than just ceremonial work. They do a lot of work with the plant kingdom and the plant intelligence. And they have a master shaman that they have to, what I call continuing education credits. They have to go in twice a year back into dieta, which is time away from modern society. And they go into the forest and they actually end up spending time with the plants. And they have to keep this connection with the plants because the plants are going to get very jealous if they're ignored. And yet you want to just use them for their wisdoms and their information and their healing. They want to be paid attention to. It actually is a relationship between the shaman and the plants. And that's why in the probably the Amazon cultures, they don't call themselves a shaman, they call them a vegetalista or a curandero. And vegetalista means they work with vegetation. And so in the West, we call them a shaman, and they'll say, yes, okay. But they come from a lineage, they start this path, this journey young in life, and they have to prove to master shamans they can go in and out of these different dimensions very easily and can offer spiritual protection to the participants that open themselves up to go into these upper dimensions. So I know shamanism has become the rage right now. A lot of people consider themselves a shaman, but they do not have any lineage. They do not have any master shaman that they've had to demonstrate their abilities to. And again, to be a shaman is more than just ceremonial work. So there is a deep connection between the plant kingdom and these vegetalists or curandero type shamans. So I think that a lot of it has to do to make sure people do their research and they actually have a shaman who is well trained and therefore they are very well protective. The medicine is pure. They sing ikaros, which are songs of reverence, blessings, prayers, when they're cutting the plant down, when they're cooking the plant, when they're preparing for ceremony. I mean, their energy goes into the brew. They clear the space energetically and spiritually to prepare this area where the participants are going to be doing this ceremonial work. I mean, so this is a very sacred ceremony and space that people walk in. They just, and it's almost like until someone's really experienced, it's really even hard to share. I mean, I do my best in my book and here with, with you and to kind of kind of give the idea of the sacredness, but it's actually an initiation. And through my research, I found the Egyptians, the Greeks, a lot of different in India, different cultures around the world over centuries have used these sacred plants for initiation, spiritual initiation rites and ceremonies. So it's fascinating that these plants have this intelligence to really talk to us and wake us up. And I think that that's really the blessing of having them on the planet to really help humanity. So in the back of my book, I say they're ambassadors for the planet, and so yes, they truly are here to help humanity.
Well, as you're talking there, I'm thinking about daily life, right? Like, how does that simplify into daily life? And I think about anyone athletic, they prepare themselves for a very long period of time. And before something, championships or marathons come up, they live and breathe what it is they're about to do. Many
Mhm.
of us who are going to prepare a very large meal for our families, it became a very sacred thing. You went to multiple different markets to gather the things that you need. And then you
Mhm.
come home and you're preparing them with so much love and preparation, right? Those are just daily things that we do to make changes in our own world that show that we're still using
Mhm.
mystical, ancient uh, things that are being handed down. We just do things a little faster now with shortcuts in our food and not being quite as devoted to certain things as we ought to be, because we've gotten away from some of this ancestral type practices. And everything that we do takes us to a higher realm, whether it's cooking and preparing, right? Whether
Mhm.
it's preparing for a sport of some sort, whether it's, the next level of a job or an education, what you dive in to do. You're doing it to get to a better level of who you are, trying to find your own identity, trying to hold on to some authenticity. And plant medicine offers so much more that I think, knowing that you have to dive into it with such reverence and respect and take steps towards some sort of ceremony. You're just not going to fly off to a land and check in, and next thing you know, you're in a room taking this trip, right? No, you're preparing for it with what you're ingesting, what you're in your mindfulness about, and all those things before, during, and after, you know, going on something like ayahuasca or psilocybins or whatever. Would you say that's kind of true?
I would, and it's interesting you brought up athletes because a lot of athletes have, and they actually are very open about it, about how ayahuasca changed their life and up their game in their abilities physically. Because the interesting thing about these plant medicines, because the receptors in our brain accept them and know them, it actually speeds up the processes within the brain. So we have actually Nobel Prize recipients, Nobel Prize winners, when they go to accept it, they will openly, because there's no stigma now, they will say if it wasn't for ayahuasca or they name some other plant medicine, they will say that I would not have been able to have the breakthrough to be able to have created this invention or something. And also in Silicon Valley, a lot of times with a lot of the technology advances, they have known to use the sacred medicines because of that reason as well, because it does speed up the processes in the brain. It creates new neural pathways. It's just amazing. So I know with iboga, which is an African root. It's called it's a masculine energy. Ayahuasca is the feminine energy. That's why you'll hear her denoted as Mother Ayahuasca. But the father is or grandfather, also been known as called, is Iboga, and that one has a masculine energy. It's very powerful. That one actually in Africa, they will take smaller doses for when they have to do extreme physical exercise or work out there. And then they'll take a higher dose for their ceremonies, for their sacred ceremonies, for opening up and having those mystical experiences. But iboga is very it's very powerful in the sense that if you go over to, let's say, Africa or another place that offers it, you have to have a heart monitor, you have to have a EKG. A lot of people have died on it. It's really strong. And depending on what you're looking for it to do. And you also have an oximeter. There's nurses there to watch you. They want to monitor your heart. They also, if you have any heart problems, you can't take iboga. You can't do it. Whereas ayahuasca is a little different. She's a little more gentler, but because she's doing so much work in the brain, there are certain medications you cannot be on. You can't have any of these at all. And because also she's if you're having seizures, you cannot take ayahuasca. That's a no-no. You cannot take it. It will actually, and it will kill you. I mean, there are people who have died under ayahuasca. They lied on their intake of what the medications they were on, the type of um, maybe some diseases or something. And so people should not take this lightly at all. I mean, this is definitely something that I would say is not casual. It's not, it is sacred, and it is, and actually there's another thing I wanted to bring up was is that the plant medicine, or I should say the master plant teacher will call you. So a lot of people, I've had a friend say, "Oh, should I take ayahuasca?" And I said, "Well, did Mother Ayahuasca call you?" And she says, "No, I'm not being called." I said, "Well, then don't do it. You know, you'll know when you're being called." There's an expression in the psychedelic community that says you heard the call. And let me tell you, when a master plan teacher is calling you, you will know. I think on a previous episode, we just kind of briefly talked about my journey, and I was saying how, well, Mother Ayahuasca calls me, and boy, she made sure I heard the call, because it was very, very clear and apparent that she was after me. And it took a year to get me from the time she started calling me to be in sitting in my first ceremony. And but people ask, well, what's this whole call thing about? It's like, well, everywhere I turned, it was all about ayahuasca. I'd run into somebody who did ayahuasca. I turn on the radio and they're talking about it. I go onto the internet and it's on the internet. And I'll turn on this music and then there's a song about ayahuasca. And I'm like, okay, I think I get it. So then I started doing my research, and I went on YouTube and I typed in ayahuasca testimonials, and started hearing about other people's testimony of their experiences with ayahuasca. And what really perked my interest was the fact that she is very effective in the ego death right away. And that really grabbed my attention, because that has been something that I had set out into the universe for spirit to help me with, because I had been meditating for 20 years and I couldn't get beyond the ego death. I couldn't get beyond the ego to get in these upper dimensions and be able to have these mystical experiences, because I came to the medicine for spiritual purposes only. And sure enough, she delivered, and she exceeded my expectations. And I ended up doing 6 ayahuasca ceremonies at this point so far. And I hear her very clearly. That is one of the things that a lot of participants will say, is because she bonds with your DNA. She's with you until you take your last breath. She is a power. She is a consciousness. You feel her energy within you. You have been initiated by her, and therefore it's almost like this mark that's been placed on your soul, this deep connection. And some people hear her, 50% hear her very loud and clearly right away, and others have to develop this inner dialogue. But she's there with you very much so. And so you feel this presence, and you'll hear people say when they're in ceremony, they feel her presence within them. She comes in and she lets herself be known. It's a very interesting feeling. When I was the first ceremony was just getting used to the medicine, and I asked her to be very gentle with me because I didn't know what to expect, and she is. But it was a very interesting feeling, because about 30 minutes after you take the brew, you start feeling this warm feeling, like as if you have an intoxicant and you get this warm, fuzzy feeling. You feel it going into your veins. You're like, okay, now I'm ready for liftoff here. And and it's almost hard to put it into words, but because I've never had that experience before, as far as this consciousness, when it comes into your cosmology, you feel this presence going through everything. It's like they're going through all your files. They're going through everything. There's no secrets held at all. She wants to know who you are, what soul group you came from, who to connect you to, what experiences she needs to facilitate that your soul wants to, or your spirit guides, or people may be lining up to talk to you when you go into these ceremonies once you've crossed the ego, the veil, and onto these other dimensions. So there's meetings set up, there's experiences, there's all kinds of things that are you're shown and explained and talked to for many people. And so she's getting to know you intimately. She wants to know everything about, so she's literally going through your entire universe. And it's a very interesting feeling because we're so used to being everything's about privacy. We're always trying to protect our privacy here in the physical realm. Well, when you cross over to the other side, there is no privacy. All is revealed. And so that was just my first ceremony, just kind of getting used to her and things of that nature. So, but again, everyone's going to have a different experience because everyone's in a different frequency. They're coming to the medicine for different reasons. They need to be shown or different things about themselves, about their life, maybe their purpose work, why they came to Earth, what's going on in their current life that needs cleaned up. So she literally goes through your entire life and she will reveal things to you that are hidden that maybe your ego doesn't want revealed, but she's going to get to the bottom of it. And she literally will go through, and it's all for guidance and protection.
So, do you think the ego is there for critical thinking and to keep you more in that logical uh, state of asking questions and discernment?
Yes, the ego is very important. It's not really our foe or enemy. In some cases, it can be, but
Sure.
it has its place. I mean, when you're in physical form, you need the mind and the ego to go through, go to your job, do the mathematics. Like I give an example in one of my books. It's like, well, when you get in the car. And soul's not driving the car, it's the ego because the mind has to calculate, the timing, when to go, and the driving. And then you go to the grocery store and you're putting items into the cart. You go out to check out and do the financial transactions. Your mind's doing the financial transaction and all this stuff. The soul is the observer of the experiences. And so the ego is the one that judges likes and dislikes. It's the one that says good and bad. The soul doesn't label things as good as bad, good or bad. It actually labels them as, it doesn't label them at all, actually. It's just the observer. And it says all experiences are needed. But it's kind of interesting how the mind will say, oh, this is terrible. This is really terrible. And then 6 months later, we're like, wow, this is, I'm so glad that happened, because if that hadn't happened, then this wouldn't happen. I wouldn't have met this person in this situation and maybe gotten a new job or however it plays out. So the ego has a very important role. The ego is an entity that is an appendage to the soul. It's not our true identity. It's like you are a soul and you have a mind, you have an ego, you have a personality, you have a body. Those are appendages to the soul, and they're definitely needed. But it comes a point where, on a spiritual journey where you get to where you just don't want the ego running your life. You want your higher self running your life. And that's when it kind of gets into a little bit of a battle there between soul and ego, because ego doesn't want to give up the throne. And soul's like, it's time to step down and now have the ego serve the higher self. And obviously, as we know, that it's much better to have our soul running our higher self running our life than our ego, because what ends up happening is we end up running around serving our ego and the ego is really meant to serve us. And so yes, it has its place. It is an entity. It does get depressed. It does become unhappy. It does get, to a level where we work our minds hard. We're working and then we're always using it, whether even when we think we're resting and we're watching a movie, we're still using our mind. The mind has to understand what's going on the screen, what people are saying, the interactions between the actors on the screen. But the best thing for the mind to help it relax is nature. So that's actually the best thing. So a vacation isn't always good just for the body. It's actually resting for the soul. I mean, I'm sorry, for the ego as well. And but yeah, I think people don't realize that our ego, we think, a lot of us think our ego is ourselves, our personality, but really it's there to help us, but we have to manage it. So as long as we're in physical form, we have to keep an eye on that ego. No matter how spiritually evolved you are, you still, when you're in physical form, you have an ego, and you still kind of have to keep an eye on it because it kind of knows when it's not being watched. But once it's become spiritualized, it pretty much settles down, and it's so happy because it realizes it's found that inner peace. Because while it's out in the world trying to run around and all these amusements to make it happy, it becomes more depressed and more unhappy. And so when it gets a taste of this divine elixir, this potion, this intoxicant that the soul just be able to just soak the ego in, it just flips over and says, "Oh, I'll forever serve you because this is much better than anything in the outer world that's been handed to me." So,
Well, I just find it very funny because, in my mind, there's always some comedy going on. And so I always see it like the ego. I used to have to wrangle the ego and sit it in a chair, tie it up, blindfold it, put duct tape on its mouth and say, now you just sit right there because I need to get into the mystical realms for a while. And so back and forth with that a few times. And now when I approach, the ego goes, okay, I'm going to sit down quietly. You don't have to duct tape me. You can go in. You know what I mean? Because I have always been shown by spirit, the ego has been running the show for millenniums. And we are in the transitional stage where the heart is taking the front seat, right? And the upper levels of the mind are taking the front seat. And so the ego still has to be there because we're physical beings, but there is a way to be synergistic. There is a way to know when to lead and when to follow. But we have to be able to step into those positions where we're the commander, right?
yeah.
So I think I've told my ego to sit it down and shut its face multiple times. Don't talk, don't get up, don't move. Shh, I need to go to these places.
Yeah, I think sometimes we feel we have to go to battle with our ego, but sometimes it revolts as well. And so
Yeah.
it wants to be, and it depends on the situation. I mean, sometimes it's like a little kid. You can be too easy with it, it'll play you, but sometimes you can be too harsh on it and it'll rebel. And so the ego is kind of like a little child. You have to love it up, but you also, because I'll say when I was writing some of these books, and my ego and my mind is like, oh, I need a break. Please, you're working me so hard. I'm like, okay, let me just finish this one page and then we'll get on a bike and we'll go for a bike ride, or we'll go take a
Mhm.
drive, or we'll go to the park, and and they're like, thank you. So I kind of have to let it play a little bit. So the key is, if you start to see your mind and your ego getting angry, that means you've worked it so hard. It's upset. It needs a break. It needs a rest. It's trying to get your attention, say, enough. I need to rest. And so we push our minds way too hard, I think, in the Western world. So I think another thing besides nature is music, like classical music,
Yes.
spa music, spiritual music. Oh, it just loves music. The ego and the mind, it's just so therapeutic for the mind to listen to music, high frequency, high vibrational music. And so that's another one too that's very soothing. Like when I get up first thing in the morning, I put on Pandora, And I have a speaker in my bathroom. So as I'm in the shower, I'm putting my makeup on, I'm already getting into this sacred uh, space. And the ego and the mind is being, smoothed out, transformed, wooed, just this sacredness of my day starting. And so there's many different things people can do, but I think we find that our society is so angry and impatient, and it's really, I think we don't give ourselves enough time to rest and do things that's actually good for the mind. And these negative thought loops that we get into, this negative talk, self-talk, and all these loops. That's another thing too that we need to be mindful of. It's just a very bad habit. But I think if we can catch ourselves, and so like people need to realize that the ego is a real entity. It wants to be cared for and acknowledged, but there are things we can do to actually be good to the ego, and so it won't rebel. And so as we spiritualize the ego, which one of the best things is exposing it to spiritual content, whether it be watching podcasts such as your show, reading spiritual books, listening to, all types of spiritual content and reading spiritual content, that spiritualizes the ego, and it starts to get into this vibrational frequency that's very high. And that's when it just naturally turns over the throne to soul. So it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be this battle. I was fortunate to have a lot of high level master soul teachers teach me a lot about the ego and about the brain and our personalities and a lot of this stuff. So that really helped me on my spiritual journey to know to how to handle and work with the ego. So in the East, they'll say befriend the ego. Make the ego your friend. You don't want it to be a foe. You don't need to have a fight on your hands. It's not really necessary. It's not really needed. So I think there is other ways, such as spiritualizing the ego, they found is actually the best way to have the ego serve you instead of you serving it.
Yeah, and I love your analogy about, okay, just let me finish this one last page and I'll get out for a bike ride. I will say, shh, mommy's coming. Just give me a minute. Just give me a few more minutes to finish what I gotta live this for just a few more minutes. There, mommy's coming. Mommy's coming. And then
That's
it'll either be a
great.
bath or be a long walk, or it'll just be music, or it's going out and meeting friends where we're just gonna laugh and there isn't all this structure. And so, yeah. Now, before that, the ego knew when mother was coming because he could hear me walking up the stairs and he would be in the chair. Okay, 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 go ahead, go ahead and get in there, you know. But when mommy's coming, it means it's bringing a lot of nurturing and love.
Yeah.
So I like that. And
Yeah.
we can find all kinds of ways to work with our ego. And I think it was important that we talked about this because learning and hearing a different perspective about it hopefully is down to earth and simple enough where people can kind of grasp, oh, I understand that better now. Because we don't
Mhm.
understand what do we understand? 20% of the brain? What's the statistics on that right now? What how much of a brain do we not know anything about?
Yeah, it's a big mystery for a lot of scientists even
Yes.
now. They're still learning about the different plant medicines and the different master plant teachers. They have been for 30 years. We've had research done with, I think last time I was my information was 23 university medical school teaching hospitals in the United States have been doing research on psychedelics and
Wow.
entheogens for 30 years. And there's so much in plant intelligence that they're still learning all the benefits of these. And so yeah, they're still on the frontier actually on this, but they've
Well,
been
I
around.
love it. I'm so happy that you're here to enlighten us and share because I think, once we get deeper into this book, I think it's going to give us a better idea for our viewers to listen to. What else
Mhm.
did you want to add to this? Because I know there's so much more we can talk about.
Gosh, you brought up the pineal gland, and I
Yes.
wanted to say about the pineal gland. The pineal gland, there's a lot that the pineal gland, they also known as God's particle, but
Hmm.
it's it right in the middle between the right and left hemisphere of the brain. It provides coherence between the right and left hemisphere of the brain, but it's also a sender and receiver. It's a huge crystal and it spins really fast. And part of how we are connected with source is through this sending and receiving of this source frequency energy that comes in. And so we're it's very interesting how it's like a radio where you're sending and it's receiving all these codes, all these light frequencies, this energy, and because really everything is energy. So once you get into the physical realm, everything is the atoms have just slowed down in their spin to where it manifests into physical form. But if you like, I'll give you the example of water, like a solid state of water where the molecules are very slow and the atoms are slow in it is ice. But then when you heat up that ice and you turn it into regular water, they're spinning faster. And then once you get it up and you heat the water and you boil the water and it turns into a steam, it spins so fast it literally disappears. The water will disappear right out of the pot. It'll just steam itself right out. So these are different. So it just saying that there are different spins and of frequencies. And so we're always getting these frequencies and sending back information back and forth to source. And so the pineal gland is, and I just find that it's interesting, it's within the brain. And so I think that really there are different levels of attainments also. So for centuries, yes, it was used for healing, but it's also used for spiritual initiations, spiritual work, people doing this type of work, whether it be the American Native American tribes here in North America or in South America, whether it's Brazil and Peru, or there's shamans in Siberia. They've got them. They're just all over. In fact, through the spice routes is where it was actually that it was introduced into India from I think it was the Siberian shamans that came in, and then they introduced Soma, Soma, and Datura, and into which was India, which got into Buddhism. The Tibetan monks used this to open up the centers and their brain into and to be able to move into these upper dimensions. So, and then also in the West as well. And I go into that more deeper into my book, but the Egyptians and the Greeks with the Eleusis mysteries, which lasted for almost 2,000 years, they had these, and they would have this twice a year. And that's where they use these entheogens, these psychedelic plants, to open up to allow people to have these intermystical experiences and for them to see their true identity. And there was like Plato, Socrates, Aristotle, Cicero. There was a number of high level people and even statesmen and that type of thing that were where everyone was allowed to go in and experience this. Rich, poor, it didn't matter if you were free or slave, whatever, everyone was allowed to have this experience. And they said that that's really what helped shape Greek society. And so it's really it gets quite deep. I found a lot of surprises myself along the way when I was doing the research on this for this dissertation, and there was a lot of aha moments. I think there's going to be a lot of aha moments for your viewers as we go through the book Master Plant Teachers for a lot of people.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. And once again, I don't know where the time went, but boom, boom, boom. So I'd love to have you back on. We're going to do this multiple times and talk about this book in depth. If you have an opportunity, get to Amazon, get the book, get to Dr. Nancy's website. You can order the book there, correct?
Yes, there's a hyperlink where they can click
Yeah.
on Amazon or Apple Books and get it.
Yeah. And listen, we're filling our head full of all kinds of other, ridiculous junk TV and junk reading and junk listening to. Why not get yourself something that could actually maybe expand you in a different way and get you closer to the God spark, within yourself. And these books do that for you. The poetry book, Teach a Plant Medicine. I'd start with those two. There's other ones that we're going to dissect as well when we get through it, because Dr. Nancy will be a staple here on Keep It Spiritually Simple. In the meantime, if you're listening to us on any of the podcasting channels and you would like to see us and our personalities and so on, hop over to YouTube to Sandra McEllis and tune in there, and also leave us a comment there. And if you have a question, we hopefully, we can answer it for you. But in the meantime, stay spiritually simple. Things don't have to be complicated. We need life to be a lot more simple and people talking more in plainness. Now, this chick here, she's got a PhD and a whole lot of experience, but what I love about her, she brings it into a level where I can understand it because I don't have that intellect. I don't have her experience. I don't have her education, but I need to be able to understand it so that I can see, sense, and feel it in a different way. And then it creates inquisitiveness within myself to want to know more. Now, at this point in time, I can't say Mother Ayahuasca or anyone has been calling me, but I am really interested in understanding more about it, just because I just find it so fascinating. And it's been a topic that has been, first of all, hidden in the back seat for a long time. And then secondly, masked by, this is not the way to go. This is bad. This is, this or that. And we do need to talk about that on the next show, about why it's been hidden, why it has that bad name. So I'm going to mark that down because I think we should bring that up. So anything else you'd like to add, Dr. Nancy?
I think I've enjoyed being on the show with you. Thank you so much for having me back. And I'm so excited to be able to share all this information about the master plant teachers and how they're transforming people's lives. So.
Well, we're happy to have you. And again, you guys, hit subscribe so you don't miss upcoming episodes with Dr. Nancy and Keep It Spiritually Simple. In the meantime, say goodbye, Dr. Nancy.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.